Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by ICOM. Heard it, worked it, logged it. Visit www.icomamerica.com/amateur for more information about ICOM radios.
It's Ham Radio.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's time for Ham Talk Live, episode number 279. The Antarctic Eclipse Festival of Frequency Measurement, recorded live on Thursday, November 4th, 2021. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight we're joined by Kristina Collins, KD8OXT, and Dr. Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF, and we will take your calls live in just a few minutes. Last week here on the show, we were talking about the Collegiate Amateur Radio Initiative with Andy Maluzzi, KK4LWR, and Tony Maluzzi, KD8RTT. So if you missed that show, you can listen anytime over at hamtalklive.com or on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. And don't forget, you can catch the rebroadcast of Ham Talk Live every Saturday afternoon on WTWW. That's 5085 on your AM dial. That's usually about 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time when they play the rebroadcast there. So thanks to WTWW for allowing us to be on their airwaves as well. Okay, so later on tonight, we've got a couple of giveaways that we're going to do, so be sure you hang around for that. But we're going to talk to Kristina and Nathaniel first, and so if you have a question, get it ready to go. Let me give you the telephone number. And after a while, after the next commercial break, we will open up the phone lines and take your comments and questions. And here is the phone number to have ready. It is 859-982-7373. Again, 859-982-7373. 7373. Have that number written down, punched in, whatever works for you, and have it ready to go. And here in a little bit, we'll let you know when it's time to call in. If you're listening to us live on Thursday night, you'll be able to do that. You can also tweet us. We're at Ham Talk Live over on Twitter. So I'll be back with Kristina and Nathaniel right after this word from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live.
I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having an antenna party and I ran out of PL259s.
Oh, come in.
Thank you.
Would silver-plated PL259s from Tower Electronics be too good for your guests?
Those will be fine. Thank you. You saved my life the other night.
Oh, the PL259s from Tower Electronics?
Yes, they were very successful at the antenna party. My antenna works like a charm.
Then how can you ever thank me?
I'll try to think of something.
Don't be caught without PL259s. Visit Tower Electronics at a ham fest near you, or visit them online anytime at pl-259.com, or call 920-435-2973. They have adapters, cables, antennas, soldering supplies, and meters too.
Ham Talk Live. What's that call sign again? WB9VPG. That's right, Delium-9 Bente Pterodactyl Gnat, right?
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Tower Electronics will be at Chickasaw, Alabama. That's the Stone Mountain, Georgia, for all intents and purposes, Ham Fest this weekend. That's November 6th and 7th, and then they'll be off to Fort Wayne, Indiana, November 13th and 14th. Montgomery, Alabama, November 19th and 20th. Ocala, Florida, December 4th. Plant City, Florida, December 10th and 11th, and you can visit them anytime from the comfort of your own home at pl-259.com. Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Tonight, Kristina Collins, KD8OXT, and Dr. Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF, join us on the Orlando Amateur Radio Club and Hamcation Hotline. Kristina Collins, KD8OXT, is an electrical engineering graduate student at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. She's been an officer of the W8EDU, Case Western Reserve Amateur Radio Club, for several years, and she's in charge of this event that we're going to be talking about tonight. She's in charge of gathering up all the data. It's HamSCI's Antarctic Eclipse Festival of Frequency Measurement, coming next month to a radio near you. Also with us is the lead of HamSCI, Dr. Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF. He is an assistant professor at the University of Scranton in physics, where he teaches digital signal processing, fundamental physics, and electromagnetics. He's the lead organizer of HamSCI, a project that explores how amateur radio can help us understand more about the physics of the ionosphere. Nathaniel completed his PhD in electrical engineering in 2016 at Virginia Tech, and worked with the Super Darn HF Radar Lab there, and was named the 2019 Hamvention Amateur of the Year. So welcome, Kristina, and welcome back, Nathaniel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Nathaniel, it's great to have you back here with us. You've come up with a lot of really interesting ham radio physics studies, and bagged some major grant money for some of that. And so we're going to talk about one of these events tonight, but you're kind of handing this one off to Kristina. And so she's working on finishing up her doctorate as well. So let's let Kristina answer, and then we'll let Nathaniel jump in here in a little bit. But Kristina, first, just tell us about the eclipse itself that's going to be taking place next month, because, you know, there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about that because we're not going to see it. So tell us about the eclipse and what you hope to measure with your ham radio observations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Neil. So the eclipse is going to be on December 4th, and it will be over Antarctica this year, which is a relatively unusual spot for an eclipse to be, all things considered. If you go to timeanddate.com, they have a really fantastic eclipse calendar, and you can see when various eclipses will cross over your path of totality. We started getting interested in this around Case because we have the big eclipse coming up in 2024 that will be in totality for here in Cleveland, Ohio. Or as we like to say around W8EDU, we paid handsomely to ensure that Case would be in totality for this and MIT would not. And
I love it.
So as to why this is an interesting thing. So as a ham radio operator, right, you work HF, you're used to the idea that radio waves during the day and at night are different, that you get propagation paths that that disappear when the sun goes down or that come out at night and things like that. And even if it's just when you were going through, I think it's on the general exam that they have a lot of it, you will have seen all of the stuff about the different layers of the ionosphere and their different behaviors. And all of the effects that are associated with the terminator or the gray line, that line between night and day that passes over the surface of the Earth. So as a general simple model of this, one moment, I must move my cat here. He was so quiet. And
Come on,
decided
Oscar.
to be on the keyboard. Yes. Go, Oscar. Shoo. Do something cat-like. All right. Thank you. So as a simple model of this, the sun ionizes electrons in the ionosphere, and it changes what we use a simple derived component of that we call the virtual height. So we have a model of the ionosphere that's like a mirror. And this is not so very different from the models that have been used since the very beginning of ionospheric physics. The big difference is that now we have precision timing, and we have GPS disciplined oscillators and Raspberry Pis and all of these wonderful bits of inexpensive instrumentation, and the ability to connect to people in the ham radio and shortwave listening community to make observations of these things. So the solar eclipse is something that's worth characterizing because it's the closest thing that you get to being able to do a controlled experiment in space, where you have this bit of darkness that goes over an area that's normally in daylight. And there are many interesting scientific papers on effects of this on the ionosphere. If you look at research being done from the 2017 eclipse and for instance, the GPS measurements of total electron content that show bow waves. And there's all sorts of things about that. So what we're working on with these, where we have, about 2 solar eclipses a year that are well positioned around the globe for science, is an opportunity to kind of engage the global community and to also use these as pilot experiments for the Personal Space Weather Station, which is HamSCI's flagship project. So the general procedure that we use for the experiment is that you do, the same thing that you might do if you're used to the frequency measuring test, where you are listening for the movement of a carrier signal from a time standard station, such as WWV or WWVH. And I'll make a note here that your listeners may want to tune into those stations at either 8 or 48 minutes past the hour sometime in the next few weeks. But yes, so when you listen to that station, right, that signal leaves the transmitter at precisely, let's say 10.000, 1 part in 10 to the 12th precision megahertz. And when it arrives at your receiver, it will have changed a little bit in frequency. And if you record this over the course of the day, you can actually see that there is a fairly typical daily trend that has all of these other noise components layered on top of it. That is the Doppler shift associated with that day-night transition that is familiar to us when we're operating HF. So we did a pilot experiment with this, with WWV for the centennial of that station in 2019. And we published on that in the IEEE, let's see, it was GRSL, that's Geoscience. Gosh, I should remember the title of this journal. You can find the paper online. It was called Citizen Scientists Collect Distributed Doppler Measurement for Ionospheric Remote Sensing. And this was about 50 ham radio operators who helped us out with collecting data for this. And if you go to that, Geoscience and Remote Sensing letters, there we go. If you go to that and you check out figure 3, you'll see the stacked plot that shows the frequency graphs for all of these ham stations. And it shows you how you can get a snapshot of the ionosphere with many distributed stations in a way that has not really been done before using a citizen science network. And the ham radio community, as it turns out, is extremely well positioned to do this type of work because you have a lot of people who already know how to do radio things in general, who are technically literate and who are often, willing to volunteer their time and their equipment to conduct large experiments. So as we're transitioning from this model of doing, this one campaign to the personal space weather station where people would have dedicated hardware, eclipses, because of the fact that they're already on the calendar and you're not going to be able to move them. And because they're, of course, quite visually spectacular and they kind of, engage that natural component of international collaboration, these make ideal pilot experiments for the different aspects of the personal space weather station that we want to learn about and test. So the instrumentation thing that I'm hoping to test out for this experiment, this is a project of 3 senior project students here at CASE. And they have been working on a piece of audio recording software, which we've been calling SNASH. Actually, there are 4 senior project students. I'm sorry. There's Martin Bui, Daniel Warner, Shiv, I don't actually know your last name. Sorry, Shiv. And Zach Kadish. And they have been developing a piece of audio recording software that is intended for distributed citizen science recording for this type of thing. So this was a need that we only discovered because we had previous experiments where people were recording with Audacity and we were finding that it wasn't a good surveillance recorder and things like that. And so each of these campaigns, we add another component, and we develop some new thing that we can use to collect data, or we look at the different observations that we've had and use those things to enhance the development of the personal space weather station. I should note that.
Let's talk a little bit about the equipment that people will need if they're going to try to help. What kind of equipment are they going to need? What do they need to do? How do they sign up? How does that happen?
Absolutely. So the first thing to do is to go to hamsci.org/festivals, and that has all of the Eclipse Festival pages. You can find the one for the Antarctic Eclipse Festival and then sign up for the mailing list. And I'll be sending out updates on there. The only thing that you need to take part in the experiment is the same thing that you need for the Festival of Frequency Measurement, which is an HF radio connected to a computer and audio recording software like the ones that we are prototyping or whatever you happen to have on hand. And we'll be taking those audio recordings and processing them to look at the change in frequency over time. You'll want to listen to whatever your favorite time standard station is. In the United States, you'll probably tune into WWV, but there's also RWM in Russia. There's BPM in China. In South America, they have some really excellent call signs. They have PPE and they have LOL in Argentina. It's a good one. I think BPM is probably still my favorite, but LOL is a good one. That one actually was turned on partway through the December 2020 Eclipse Festival when we had the Path of Totality across South America. And so generally we've got some procedures, some things to try. And for this particular event, it's you set things up and you make a recording and then you send in the data, and we'll be putting it through the high performance computing cluster here at CASE to extract the frequency data from all of these data sets. Because we want to be able to try out different algorithms. So that's why we record audio data rather than doing what we did for the first experiment, which was to use FL Digi to just make an estimation of the frequency for each operator. So it takes a while to get the data processed. That's the only downside of going to audio. But we've learned a lot from it about how to set things up for the personal space weather station, how to do science with other ham radio operators in the same area. And you can run a Doppler experiment on your own and get sort of an idea of things. But I find that really the best way to do it is if you make a recording and then you also have your friend who lives not too far away make a recording, and then you compare your graphs, because that lets you make sure that when you see the graph zig or zag, if it goes the same direction as your friend's graph does, then you can make a reasonable assumption that that was something that was geophysical in nature and not just your dishwasher turning on and off. And it can really give you kind of a sense of what is going on in, the geospace environment at your QTH. That's something that's very remarkable about it. Another thing about it is that you can see when you look at these that you'll have a very clear snapshot that looks one way in California, and you'll have a very clear snapshot that looks completely different, in the area around Cleveland, Ohio, on a given day. So we have a lot of people who are doing prototype stations of the low-cost personal space weather station, which is the version I'm working on in my PhD work, which looks only at these Doppler shifts and signals from time standard stations, essentially taking that infrastructure and using them as passive radar beacons. So we have these collections of plots that we get every day, and we go and compare them. And, there's whenever we have a CME, it's always fun to watch everybody say, oh, look, mine did this or mine did that. And you start to get some very interesting jumps, especially as you accumulate data over time.
Oh, very good. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and the personal weather station after the break. But before we take our break, Nathaniel, talk a little bit about Kristina's role in this and kind of, starting to branch out to where you're not the only one, heading up these projects.
Oh, well, it's fantastic. Kristina's just an excellent leader.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. But yeah, I mean, Case Western has really, they're the ones that came up with the idea for the GRAPE low-cost personal space weather station. And they've really taken the reins on this. And every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, we get on Zoom, and Kristina runs the group meeting. And she just does a wonderful job, keeping everything in line, keeping track of everything, interacting with the general public, keeping track of the different things that need to be done for the GRAPE with the Case Western team. She's advising the undergraduate students. So it's just great working with her. And I'm so glad that she's on the project and doing all of this. So it's really wonderful for HamSCI to have her participate and lead. And it's just really great. Well,
that's the challenge of this, is you've got the groundbreaking stuff done. Now it's time to spread it out and let it start growing exponentially. And this is a great move for that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And so, I mean, that is one of the things, when HamSCI first started, we had, one project and essentially we were very focused on it. And, now that we have a number of funded projects and, we're always encouraging people to participate in different ways. And we like to see people bring up their own ideas. So you start seeing these side projects take off, and you kind of can identify some natural leaders of different projects. And so we're growing organically. So Kristina is certainly one of those natural leaders. She's doing this. She also has another project where we're actually putting some signals onto the WWV transmissions. We're doing some test signals with that. That's coming up. So you really need people like Kristina to help lead and guide these different projects.
Well, that's really cool and great to see that you're already passing on some of the work and spreading it out and hopefully get it to where it's a perpetual thing. So that's great. And we can tune in to WWV all the time. So there we go. All right. Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines and check the tweets and probably talk a little bit more about this personal weather station thing going on. So we'll do that right after this word from ICOM America right here on Ham Talk Live. Spice up your ham shack with ICOM's IC705. This portable radio is perfect for staying in or venturing out and working your favorite bands this winter season. Happy holidays from ICOM. The IC705 is the perfect sidekick and QRP companion. It has base station features and functionality at the tip of your fingers in a portable package, covering HF 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. This compact rig weighs in at just over 2 pounds, with RF direct sampling for most of the HF band and IF sampling for frequencies above 25 megahertz. It has a 4.3-inch color touchscreen with live band scope and waterfall, 5 watts with a battery, 10 watts with a power supply, sideband CW AM FM full D-Star functions, micro USB connector, Bluetooth, wireless LAN, integrated GPS with antenna, a micro SD card slot, a speaker mic comes standard and supports QRP and QRPP operations. The perfect accessory is the optional backpack LC192 with a special compartment for your IC705 and room for accessories for soda activations or a day out in the wild. Our family of favorite ICOM amateur radios are also available this holiday season. The IC9700, IC7300, and IC7610 base stations, ID52 handheld coming soon, and the ID5100A mobile are the perfect gift, and it's the most wonderful time of year to give the gift of ICOM. Visit ICOMAmerica.com/amateur for more information on ICOM radios.
Join the conversation. Give us a call at 859-982-7373. Again, the number to call is 859-982-7373. Or, if you'd rather type than talk, tweet us at Ham Talk Live. Now, here's Neil Rapp with more Ham Talk Live.
Here's the snap. Rapp takes the rig. He breaks through the pileup. He's on 80, now 40, now 20, 15, 10, 2 meters. Touchdown, Ham Talk Live.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. We're on the air every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at hamtalklive.com, and be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Well, before we open up the phone lines at 859-982-7373 and check the tweets and talk some more with Kristina and Nathaniel, we have once again the Ham Radio Joke of the Week.
Now it's time for the Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week, the part of the show where Rick tells us a ham radio joke. The Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week is brought to you by QRM Labs. Now, here's Rick Garrett in 9 GSU with today's Ham Talk Live Joke of the Week.
I started a band with a bunch of fellow ham radio operators, and we're calling ourselves 999 Megabytes. Well, we haven't got a gig yet.
This has been the Ham Talk Live Ham Radio Joke of the Week with Rick Garrett in 9 GSU. Tune in again next week for another joke from Rick.
Oh, my goodness.
That was good.
There's
I like
no
that.
good.
I like
There's
it
no
too,
gig.
yeah. Oh my.
Well, it's time for your phone calls now. So now is the time to punch those buttons. It's 859-982-7373. 7373. Again, 859-982. 7373, or you can tweet us. It's at Ham Talk Live on Twitter. And if you're listening to us on WTWW or the podcast version, you won't be able to reach us live since we're doing this on Thursday evening. So let's kind of jump back in here, and we'll see if we have any questions from anybody tonight. Nathaniel, talk a little bit about this personal space weather station that's been put together and how that's being deployed.
Sure. Thanks, Neil. So as Kristina has said before, the personal space weather station is the flagship project of the HamSCI community right now. And essentially, the goal of it is to design some sort of device that you could operate in your own backyard that helps you to measure space weather. And what does that mean? Well, it means a number of different things. We're interested in anything that can affect radio propagation or that could sense currents in space or changes in the ionosphere. So the personal space weather station, the original design, we have three major components. We have a radio component, we have a ground magnetometer component, and there's also a GPS component. So the radio component, what that does, if you have the GRAPE low-cost personal space weather station, the goal of that is to listen to WWV and look for these changes in received frequency, the Doppler shift, and that is caused by changes in the ionosphere. And we can take that information and we can back out information about how the ionosphere is changing. So that's one component. The second component is the ground magnetometer, and that particular system is used to measure changes in the Earth's magnetic field. And these changes are very small changes, are actually due to currents flowing overhead, either in the ionosphere or in space. So if there's a geomagnetic storm or a big auroral event, you should be able to sense those changes with the ground magnetometer. The GPS system has a couple of different purposes. One purpose is to provide very stable frequency and time references to the radio device and also to the magnetometer. And also, if with certain GPS receivers, you can actually measure the total number of electrons between the GPS receiver on the ground and the satellite in space. We do have one other version of the personal space weather station that is still very much under development, and that's this Tangerine software-defined radio. So we're still working on developing that right now. It's not quite ready, but the GRAPE low-cost personal space weather station version 1, we have a number of people deploying that and using it already. The ground magnetometer, a number of people are using that already, and so those are out and are being used.
Well, Kristina, we kind of shifted gears there a little bit. You were making some connections to this weather station that Nathaniel just explained to us. So if you can kind of pick up where we kind of left that and make the connections here between the eclipse measurements and this personal weather station.
Yeah, absolutely. So what the GRAPE, as we call it, and the reason we call it the GRAPE is because the main PSWS is called the Tangerine. It's being developed by the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio Network, TAPR crowd. And they have a very active development list, and all of this is on, I think it's hamsci.org/PSWS. We call the GRAPE, which was a moniker that was coined by AC8YV, because it's first of all, it's a tiny piece of electronics. So people always name tiny pieces of electronics after tiny pieces of fruit. So you've got, your Raspberry Pi, your Kiwi SDR, your Lime SDR, etc. And GRAPE wasn't taken yet. But the other thing that we like to say is that it does its best work in bunches. And I mentioned earlier that the best way to do the sort of deployments of these is to have one at your house and then one at your friend's house that's, down the block or 5 miles away. And there are various lessons that we've been incorporating into the development that we've learned through doing pilot experiments. Because one of the nice things about putting a pilot experiment together for a short-term recording, what you call a campaign, is that it has sort of the same kinds of aspects as a ham radio contest. It's something that you do for a certain period of time, and then it's over, and you can try different things and you can set it up to sort of encourage the things that you want to see happen. So in the same way that, you structure a contest, field day, you get points for owning a fire extinguisher, for example. I'm pretty sure it's the only contest that does that. School Club Roundup is my favorite example, how the way that the point structure is set up makes it so that you want to talk to schools. But you can do very similar things where you can leverage this towards data collection in science campaigns. And so when we do this for the eclipses, there have been sort of different kind of scientific themes or different data collection themes. I started doing this this was for June of last year, and it was a very, sort of let's put something together and see what happens kind of experiment, because there was an annular solar eclipse across China. And so I put together a web page and duplicated the same protocol that we did for the original Festival of Frequency Measurement and said, okay, let's use this same protocol, but we'll try tuning to BPM instead of WWV. And interesting things sort of began to come out of the woodwork. For one thing, someone came in and translated the instructions into Dutch. So then I had a whole bunch of ham radio operators in the Netherlands who were, collecting Doppler data all of a sudden. And, where you get these little pockets of participation are always interesting and really impossible to predict, because I was showing the map to a friend last night and she was like, why do you have so many people in Greece? And I think it was because, somebody brought it to their club and showed it around. But I wound up with a huge amount of European participation. We actually there were participants on 6 continents for that event, and also for the one in December that followed it for the eclipse across South America. And so for the June 2020 event, one of the things that the European stations noticed was that just using FL-Digi's frequency estimation mode, you would end up with really noisy data because there was a station in Italy that I hadn't known about. So there were actually 2 different stations that were just off frequency from each other, and the algorithm that was looking for the carrier would bounce between them. So this was how we started with audio recording. And the entire community of people that were volunteering for this experiment, we did one test round, figured out this was happening about a week before the actual event. And then I asked them to record audio, and everyone just pivoted, and about half of the group did that. And so I had, I think, maybe 50 stations from that experiment. I know for December, there were about 83 stations that recorded audio of various stations. For June of this year, where there was a partial eclipse that went it had a very strange path of totality. You can see this in the maps online. It went over the Arctic. And I'm curious to see what people will figure out about the overlap between that and, auroral precipitation in that region. For that one, we had people try different, time standard stations according to their preference. And, I suggested, well, you might want to try RWM, but really try whatever station you want. And so seeing, what people chose to record, what people found at their various areas, just kind of playing with it, you pick up these different insights about where stations are that you can use as beacons, what you can do with them. And then also, how far apart should these stations be to be able to sort of distribute them around? When you do this as a campaign, you're doing everything that you would do with setting up a network, but you get to sort of see some of the end results in kind of preview mode. You skip over several of the really hard decisions that you would be making if you were trying to set up a scientific, remote sensing network from scratch. Like, you don't know where you would put the stations. So you just see what happens. You don't know what particular set of data you necessarily even want to collect. So you just try to get whatever you can. And there were many interesting elements of looking at, the participation maps all by themselves and sort of the social aspect of it and the international collaboration, which of course is one of the core principles of ham radio, the way in which the community steps up. And then also just looking at what happens in the plots, the different types of noise and things that you see. Now, when we move to doing this with the Grape Network, we will be able to have a certain level of known good stations. We'll know, for instance, that if somebody's running a Grape station, that they have the same signal chain as somebody else who's running a different Grape station. And that this will be set up in such a way that probably that they will have, done it maybe in a cluster with some other people, as I've been talking about, and you'll be able to reference them off of each other. So the real, my favorite thing, I think, of all of the communications that I've had with volunteers was I got this wonderful email from one of the radio operators in the Netherlands, where he sent me this graph that he had made with, 2 or 3 of his friends, where they had lined their charts up. And he said, I don't know what we're seeing here. I don't know if this is the ionosphere or if it's local noise, but we're having a lot of fun. And that was really kind of the whole point of doing the pilot experiments, was that it was a way for people to come together and try this out and sort of get a better understanding of your own environment and tie it into what other people are doing. So really, the eclipse is just an excuse to do that, in the same way that a contest is just an excuse to operate.
Well, it's some fascinating stuff, Kristina, and thank you so much for taking this one on, and Nathaniel for the overarching scientific tie-in to amateur radio. It's one that's near and dear to my heart, being a science educator, and just really impressed with what you've been able to do. So thank you so much for coming on and telling us about it, and thanks for all the work, and good luck on the eclipse next month. And Nathaniel, remind everybody where they can sign up and do this stuff.
Sure. So for the eclipse specifically, you can go to hamsci.org/festivals, or you can go to hamsci.org. You click projects, and then you see eclipse and frequency measurement festivals, and you can pick the December 2021 eclipse measurement festival. All the way at the bottom, there's a link for the Google group there. There's also a main Google group. You just go to hamsci.org, click get involved, and all of the information is right there.
All right. Very good. Kristina, any final comments?
Other than hamsci.org/festivals, none in particular, but I hope that, that we get some good participation this year. And I will say one thing because this is a question I get a lot. Folks often ask, is it still worthwhile for me to collect data even if I'm far from the path of totality? And of course, for this particular experiment, everyone's far from the path of totality, really. And the answer is yes, because what we're looking for with the Grape Network are wave-like structures that propagate through the ionosphere. We're looking for traveling ionospheric disturbances, and those can go for hundreds of kilometers. They can travel a very great distance. So even if, you're looking at things that are away from the sort of perturbing force, we may still be able to observe some quite interesting things together.
Sounds great. Nathaniel, any final comments?
We look forward to everyone participating, and it's been a real pleasure being on your show.
All right. Well, look forward to seeing you again soon, and look forward to hearing about how this next big project goes. So thanks for being here. And we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of giveaways here before we go. First of all, Christian K0STH over at 100 Watts and a Wire is giving away $1,000 on his show. You can go over to 100wattsandawire.com and read the rules there, but basically you go on and make a wish list, and then you get all the stuff if you win. So make sure you check that out, 100wattsandawire.com. Also, here at Ham Talk Live, we have a giveaway for the month of November. One of my friends and listeners of the show, Tanner Jones, W9TWJ, is giving away 2 free remote license testing opportunities. So you can take your test by remote, Zoom usually, and we're going to give away one for a listener of Ham Talk Live that hasn't been licensed yet, so you're brand new to Ham and Radio. We want to give you a chance to win a free license test, and it's a remote one, so you can do it from anywhere. And then we're also going to give away one for someone who wants to upgrade. So if you're already a licensed amateur, there's a separate giveaway for that one. So here's how you enter. You go to win.hamtalklive.com, and that will give you all the details, and then you can click and fill out the form there for a chance to win. We're going to cut that off on November 30th, so you have until the end of the month to sign up, and we'll give these 2 remote testing sessions. Tanner's going to pay the fees for those, so we're going to give those away to one random entry from those forms. So again, it's win.hamtalklive.com to enter. Well, that is a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. Thanks to my guests, Kristina Collins, KD8OXT, and Dr. Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF, and everybody out there in cyberspace for listening and calling in. And invite you back next Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at hamtalklive.com. And if you'd like to see who's coming up on the show next, you can also find that at hamtalklive.com. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.
Well, you came right back to my CQ call. Your readability fine.